Have you ever wondered why the loudest relationships often leave you feeling the emptiest inside? You give everything, your time, your energy, your body, yet wake up one morning staring at the ceiling, asking yourself who you even are anymore. That hollow ache isn't random. It's the soul's silence finally breaking through the noise, demanding you listen. Today we're diving into the alchemy of abstinence, the deliberate choice to step back from romantic and sexual pursuit, not as punishment, but as the most radical act of self-reclamation a woman can make. Carl Jung would call this the beginning of individuation, the journey to become your whole, undivided self. And it starts the moment you decide your worth isn't negotiable. Most women have been conditioned to believe love arrives through surrender. Give more, open faster, prove you're different from the rest. But surrender without sovereignty creates dependency, not devotion. Jung observed that we project our inner opposites, the animus in women, onto partners, seeing in them the strength, clarity, or purpose we haven't yet claimed. When the relationship ends, the projection collapses and the unclaimed parts of you come crashing back, often mislabeled as heartbreak. Abstinence interrupts this cycle. It forces the projection to dissolve in solitude, so you can meet those disowned qualities face to face. You stop outsourcing your power and start cultivating it internally. That's the alchemy, turning the lead of external validation into the gold of self-generated worth. Think about the last time you ignored a red flag because the chemistry felt electric. Your body responded, your mind spun stories of potential, and your intuition whispered caution. But you silenced it. Why? Because the collective unconscious carries an ancient script. A woman's value peaks in youth and beauty, so secure the bond quickly. Modern trauma psychology confirms this isn't just cultural, it's neurological. Early experiences of conditional love wire the nervous system to equate intimacy with survival. The brain floods with dopamine during pursuit, then crashes into cortisol when the dynamic turns inconsistent. Abstinence rewires this pathway. By removing the external trigger, you give the nervous system space to regulate. You learn that safety isn't found in another person's arms, it's built through consistent self-regard. You might be thinking, but I'm not broken, I just want connection. Exactly. Abstinence isn't about swearing off love forever. It's about refusing to accept counterfeits. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have so little time, but that we lose so much. Every month spent chasing someone who can't meet you halfway is a month you're not meeting yourself. When you pause the chase, you create a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum," Jung would say, and the psyche rushes to fill it with insight. Memories surface. Patterns reveal themselves. You notice how you dimmed your ambition to keep him comfortable or how you accepted crumbs because full loaves felt unrealistic. These aren't failures, they're data. Abstinence turns the data into wisdom. Let's get specific. Imagine you're 3 months in. The initial withdrawal stings. Your phone stays quiet, your body remembers touch. Your friends post couple photos that twist the knife. This is the shadow emerging. Jung defined the shadow as everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. In relationships, the shadow often shows up as neediness, jealousy, or control, qualities we project onto crazy exes while pretending we're above it. Abstinence drags the shadow into daylight. You see how you use seduction as armor, how you mistook intensity for intimacy. The discomfort isn't punishment, it's initiation. Epictetus taught that we don't control outcomes, only our judgments about them. Judge the ache as evidence of growth, and it becomes fuel. Judge it as proof you're unlovable, and it becomes a cage. You're not alone in this. Studies on attachment show that anxious, preoccupied women experience the highest distress during romantic droughts, but also the greatest gains in self-concept when they commit to intentional solitude. The brain literally prunes old neural connections and forges new ones oriented toward intrinsic goals. You start choosing activities because they light you up, not because they'll make you a better story for someone else. Your gym routine, your reading list, your savings account, these aren't glow-up tactics to attract the next guy. They're offerings to the self you abandoned while performing girlfriend. Here's where it gets powerful. As the animus integrates, you stop auditioning for roles you were born to direct. The animus isn't a man, it's the inner masculine. Logic, assertion, vision. When repressed, it leaks out as manipulation or passivity. When owned, it becomes discernment. You spot love bombing on day 2 instead of month 6. You walk away from situationships without a PowerPoint of justifications. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Abstinence is the training ground for that power. Every urge you don't act on strengthens the muscle of deliberate choice. You'll still feel desire, that's human. The difference is you'll relate to it as information, not instruction. I want him becomes, what unmet need is this craving pointing to? Often the answer is rest, creativity, or simple acknowledgement. You give that to yourself first. Over time, the craving loses its tyrannical grip. You're no longer a beggar at love's table. You're the chef deciding what nourishes you. This isn't suppression, it's sovereignty. The silence deepens, and with it comes the confrontation you cannot outrun. The moment you meet the part of yourself that believed love required sacrifice of identity. Jung called this the persona, the social mask you polish to stay acceptable, desirable, chosen. In relationships, the persona works over time. You adjust your laugh, soften your opinions, schedule your life around his availability. Abstinence strips the mask away because there is no audience left to applaud. What remains is raw, unfiltered you, and the terror is real. Most women bolt at this juncture, swiping right to drown the discomfort in new possibility. But you stay. You choose the harder path because you sense that the persona's collapse is not destruction, it is excavation. Consider the animus more closely now, not as an abstract inner male, but as the constellation of qualities you were taught to outsource. Decision-making, boundary setting, future planning. In childhood, many girls learn that assertiveness threatens connection. Good girls accommodate. They intuit needs before they are spoken. This adaptation served survival once, but in adulthood it becomes a trauma bond blueprint. You attract partners who expect mind reading because you trained the muscle early. Abstinence reveals the cost: exhaustion, resentment, the slow erosion of self-trust. When you stop performing emotional labor for an imaginary beloved, the muscle atrophies and then rebuilds under your own command. You begin to notice micro moments of reclamation. You say no to a social invitation that drains you, and the world does not end. You invest in a course that excites you without calculating how it might impress a future partner. These are not grand gestures. They are neural votes for a new identity. Modern self-worth research shows that identity consolidation predicts relational satisfaction more reliably than attachment style alone. In other words, the clearer you are on who you are, the less tolerance you have for dynamics that require shape-shifting. Abstinence accelerates identity consolidation by removing the funhouse mirrors of romantic feedback. Epictetus asked, "How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?" The question lands differently in solitude. Without the dopamine drip of texts and touches, time stretches. A week feels like a month. You confront the boredom you once medicated with flirtation. Boredom, Jung observed, is the psyche's way of signaling untapped potential. In the past, you filled the void with fantasy, the perfect message, the perfect date, the perfect reconciliation. Now the void stares back, and you learn to sit with it. You discover that boredom tolerated becomes curiosity cultivated. You pick up the guitar you abandoned at 22. You read the philosophy book that intimidated you. You journal without curating the narrative for anyone else's consumption. This is where the collective unconscious begins to speak. Archetypes emerge unbidden in dreams and daydreams. The wise woman, the warrior, the orphan. They are not decorations. They are psychological realities pressing for integration. The orphan carries the wound of abandonment, the fear that aloneness equals annihilation. In relationships, she clings. In abstinence, she learns that aloneness is not abandonment. It is the cradle of autonomy. You feed the orphan with evidence. Rent paid from your account, decisions honored by your word, evenings planned by your desire. Each act is a lullaby that quiets the ancient panic. Meanwhile, the warrior sharpens her blade. Seneca wrote that every new obstacle is an opportunity to practice virtue. The obstacle here is the cultural narrative that a woman's abstinence equals failure. Friends ask if you're okay. Dating apps algorithmically punish inactivity. Your mother worries aloud about your clock. The warrior does not argue, she observes. She notes the projection. Their discomfort is not your burden. She practices the stoic discipline of the dichotomy of control. She cannot change their scripts, but she can refuse to star in them. You will still feel the pull of old patterns. A man at the coffee shop smiles and your body remembers the script. Lean in, laugh louder, offer the opening. The difference is the pause. Abstinence has lengthened the space between impulse and action. In that pause resides freedom. You register the flutter in your chest, the micro-fantasy of being seen, and you let it pass without obedience. Neurobiologically, you are strengthening the prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, while weakening the amygdala's hijack. Over months, the flutter becomes data, not destiny. Have you noticed how your standards have shifted without announcement? The traits you once negotiated, consistency, emotional availability, respect for your time, are now non-negotiable. This is not pickiness, it is alignment. Trauma psychology identifies hyper-independence as a common detour where the pendulum swings from people-pleasing to isolation. Abstinence walks the middle path. You learn interdependence, the capacity to connect without fusion, to need without collapsing. You practice this first with friends, mentors, even strangers in passing conversations. You disclose a vulnerability and watch it land without punishment. You ask for support and receive it without debt. These are dress rehearsals for the intimacy you will one day choose, not settle for. The animus, now less projection and more partner, begins to speak in your own voice. You catch yourself thinking, I will handle this, instead of who will handle this for me? You negotiate the raise. You end the situationship with clarity instead of chaos. You plan the trip alone and discover that solitude is not the absence of company, but the presence of self. Marcus Aurelius journaled nightly to examine his day. In abstinence, your journal becomes a record of sovereignty. The moments you chose yourself when the easier path was self-betrayal. The terrain shifts again, and now you stand at the edge of the wound you have spent a lifetime outrunning. The fear that if you are fully seen, you will be fully rejected. Jung described this as the confrontation with the personal unconscious, the repository of every moment you were told, directly or subtly, that your authentic self was too much or not enough. In relationships, this fear masquerades as accommodation. You edit your needs, mute your rage, swallow the truth that would disrupt the fragile peace. Abstinence removes the relationship as anesthetic, and the wound reopens, not to torment you, but to drain the infection. You begin to trace the wound's origin without the buffer of romance. Perhaps it was the father who praised compliance, the mother who modeled self-erasure, the peer group that rewarded the cool girl archetype. Trauma psychology names this relational trauma, injuries inflicted not by overt abuse but by chronic misattunement. The child learns that love is conditional on performance, and the adult replays the audition in every partnership. Abstinence is the refusal to audition anymore. You stop performing safety and start cultivating it. The first step is grief. You grieve the years spent shapeshifting, the dreams deferred to keep someone comfortable, the rage you swallowed until it turned inward as depression. Grief in solitude is different from grief in partnership. There is no one to soothe you with promises, no distraction and shared plans. You sit with the raw data, the journal entries that read like apologies, the photos where your smile never reached your eyes, the apologies you offered for existing. Jung saw grief as the psyche's way of metabolizing the past. You do not rush it. You let the tears come without labeling them weakness. Seneca advised, bear and endure, for this is the lot of the human condition. The endurance is not passive, it is active containment. You hold the pain without leaking it into new connections, without using another person as a bandage. As the grief settles, something unexpected emerges. Righteous anger. Not the explosive kind that destroys, but the clean, focused kind that clarifies. You are angry at the systems that taught you to shrink, at the partners who accepted the shrinkage, at yourself for complying. The animus channels this anger into boundaries. You delete the ex's number not out of spite, but out of respect for your nervous system. You decline the harmless flirtation that would reopen old circuits. You speak the unsaid sentence in therapy: I was not the problem. Modern research on post-traumatic growth shows that anger, when metabolized, becomes agency. You are no longer asking permission to take up space. You are claiming it. This claiming reveals a new archetype: the sovereign. She is not the queen waiting for a king. She is the ruler of her inner kingdom. The sovereign does not negotiate her non-negotiables. She schedules her life around her values, not his calendar. She invests her resources, time, money, energy into the legacy she chooses, not the validation she craves. In the collective unconscious, the sovereign has always existed, but she was buried under layers of good girl conditioning. Abstinence is the excavation. You meet her in the moments you choose yourself, when the old script screams for approval. You meet her when you walk past the mirror and see not an object of desire, but a subject of destiny. You will still encounter triggers. A song plays, a scent wafts, a memory ambushes. The difference is your response. Where once you texted him at 2 a.m. to regulate the spike, now you breathe through it. You use the 4 to 7 and 8 technique, or simply name the sensation. This is activation, not truth. Polyvagal theory explains why this works. You are teaching the vagus nerve that safety can be self-generated. The body learns that a racing heart does not require external rescue. Over time, the triggers lose their charge. They become historical artifacts, not current emergencies. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by things, but by our opinions about them. In abstinence, you examine the opinions that kept you small. If I am alone, I am unworthy. If I say no, I will be abandoned. If I prioritize myself, I am selfish. You test these beliefs against reality. You say no and are not abandoned. You are respected. You prioritize yourself and are not selfish. You are sustainable. You remain alone and discover you are not unworthy. You are becoming. The beliefs crumble under the weight of lived evidence. Have you noticed how your dreams have changed? Where once you dreamed of weddings and reconciliations, now you dream of journeys. You climb mountains alone. You build houses with your own hands. You speak in front of crowds who listen. Jung interpreted dreams as the unconscious compensating for conscious deficits. Your psyche is no longer compensating for a lack of partnership. It is compensating for a lack of self-authorship. You wake from these dreams with a sense of possibility, not longing. You write them down not to decode a future lover, but to map your own becoming. The sovereign begins to attract differently. Not because you are healed in some final sense, individuation is lifelong, but because your energy has shifted. You are no longer broadcasting availability at any cost. You broadcast selective openness. Men sense the difference. The ones who thrived on your insecurity drift away. The ones who can meet you as an equal linger, curious. You do not rush to test this. You observe. You let the new dynamic reveal itself without forcing intimacy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. You waste no more time arguing what love should feel like. You become the standard." The alchemy now enters its crucible phase. The deliberate confrontation with the mother wound, that ancient imprint of how femininity was modeled, rewarded, or punished in your earliest environment. Jung understood the mother archetype as the source of both nurturing and devouring energies. And for many women, the relationship with the mother, or the absence of one, becomes the unconscious template for self-nurturing. In romantic pursuit, this wound often manifests as overgiving. You become the mother you never had, or the one you feared becoming, pouring care into partners who cannot reciprocate because they mirror the original emotional unavailability. Abstinence severs this reenactment. You stop mothering men and start mothering yourself. A radical reparenting that rewrites the nervous system's earliest code. You notice the pattern first in small ways. You cook a meal not to impress, but because your body deserves nourishment. You buy the soft blanket not to stage a cozy Instagram, but because comfort is your birthright. These acts feel almost illicit at first, selfishness disguised as care. Trauma research identifies this as the fawn response, survival through people-pleasing rooted in early caregiving roles. Perhaps you were the emotional caretaker of a depressed parent, the mediator of conflict, the easy child who never asked for too much. The adult version seeks partners who replicate the dynamic, emotionally immature men who reward your caretaking with intermittent affection. Abstinence ends the transaction. You become both giver and receiver, and the integration is disorienting in its simplicity. Seneca observed that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The mother wound thrives in imagination. The fantasy that if you had been different, quieter, prettier, less needy, the love would have been unconditional. In solitude, you test this fantasy against memory. You revisit the moments of rejection not to indict the past, but to indict the story you built around it. She didn't see me becomes I learned to hide. He didn't choose me becomes I learned to audition. The shift is subtle but seismic. You stop seeking the original wound's repair in new arms and start repairing it with your own. This repair reveals the devouring mother archetype within. She is the inner voice that demands perfection before rest, achievement before joy, sacrifice before self. In relationships, she justifies exhaustion. If I just do more, he will finally see my worth. Abstinence starves her. When there is no external object to devour your energy, she turns inward, and you meet her. You see how you devoured your own dreams to keep the peace, how you devoured your boundaries to keep the connection. Jung taught that archetypes are not enemies, but energies requiring conscious relationship. You relate to the devouring mother not by banishing her, but by setting limits. You rest without guilt. You say no without apology. You choose ease without earning it. The body keeps its own counsel. You notice physical shifts. Sleep deepens, digestion steadies, the chronic jaw tension eases. Polyvagal theory explains this as ventral vagal activation, the state of social engagement without threat. In the past, your nervous system toggled between fight, rage at unfair treatment, and fawn, over-accommodation to restore safety. Abstinence introduces a third option, regulated presence. You learn to hold space for your own emotions without outsourcing regulation. A panic attack at 3 a.m. no longer requires a text to an ex for soothing. You place a hand on your chest, name the sensation, and watch it crest and recede. The body learns that you are the safe attachment figure it always needed. Epictetus reminded himself, no one can hurt you without your consent. The mother wound taught you to consent to hurt by equating love with endurance. You consented to silence when you wanted to scream. You consented to crumbs when you hungered for feasts. Abstinence is the daily practice of withdrawing consent. You consent only to dynamics that expand you. You consent only to your own voice in your own head. This is not coldness, it is calibration. The heart, freed from overextension, begins to beat at its natural rhythm. You start to dream of water. Jung associated water with the unconscious, the realm of emotion and origin. In your dreams, you are no longer drowning, you are swimming. You dive deep and retrieve objects, a locket, a key, a child's shoe. These are fragments of the self you submerged to stay afloat in dysfunctional love. You bring them to the surface not to display but to integrate. The locket holds the capacity for tenderness you feared was weakness. The key unlocks the ambition you locked away to avoid outshining him. The child's shoe reminds you that play is not frivolous. It is the original language of the soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." In abstinence, thought becomes deliberate. You catch the old refrain, "If I were thinner, funnier, more successful, he would stay." And you replace it with evidence. You are already whole. You are already worthy. You are already enough. The replacement is not affirmation wallpaper, it is forensic. You collect data, the friend who celebrates your quirks, the mentor who trusts your insight, the stranger who holds the door with genuine warmth. The evidence mounts until the old thought loses its vote. The reparented self begins to attract from overflow, not deficit. You are no longer the woman who loves to be loved. You are the woman who loves because she is already full. This fullness is magnetic, but you do not wield it as bait. You observe who is drawn to the light and who is threatened by it. You do not audition them either. You simply remain in your own orbit, allowing gravity to do its work. The crucible cools, and what remains is the refined ore of your erotic sovereignty. The realization that your desire is not a liability to be managed, but a compass to be trusted. Jung located eros in the life force itself. the creative impulse that animates art, ambition, and intimacy alike. In the Iai past, you outsourced eros to partners, believing your desire required their permission to exist. You performed passion to keep them engaged, muted pleasure to keep them comfortable, or exaggerated ecstasy to keep them convinced of your value. Abstinence reclaims eros as an internal resource. You stop auditioning your sexuality and start inhabiting it, a shift that rewrites the very architecture of attraction. You notice the change first in your body's language, where once you tensed at the thought of being too much, now you move with unapologetic occupancy. You stretch in the morning without checking if anyone is watching. You dance in your kitchen to a song that makes your hips remember their own rhythm. These are not rehearsals for seduction, they are declarations of residence. Modern somatic psychology confirms that embodied presence predicts secure attachment more than cognitive insight alone. When you inhabit your skin without performance, the nervous system registers safety. The pelvic floor relaxes, the breath deepens, the eyes soften. You are no longer bracing for judgment, you are simply being. The animus, now a fully integrated ally, guards the gate of your eros. He is no longer the critical father or the rescuing prince, he is the discerning sentinel who asks, does this expand or contract her life force? You apply this question to everything. The book that ignites your mind, the friendship that challenges your growth, the flirtation that arrives unbidden. The sentinel does not moralize desire, he contextualizes it. A late-night scroll through an ex's profile contracts you. Energy leaks, focus fragments. A solo evening with a novel that makes you weep with recognition expands you. Energy circulates, insight compounds. You learn to follow the expansion. Seneca wrote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." In abstinence, preparation is the daily tending of your inner garden. You water the soil of creativity with uninterrupted hours. You prune the weeds of comparison with curated inputs. You fertilize the roots of self-trust with kept promises. When opportunity arrives, a man who meets your eyes with curiosity rather than conquest, you are not a barren field begging for seed. You are a thriving ecosystem capable of mutual nourishment. The difference is palpable. He senses the difference between a woman who needs him to complete her and a woman who invites him to co-create with her. The latter is rare, the latter is you. You will still feel the ancient pull of the collective script, the pressure to pair, to prove fertility, to secure legacy before the arbitrary deadline. The script speaks loudest in moments of vulnerability, ovulation, holidays, the friend's engagement announcement, the eros compass wavers. You consider lowering the bar just this once. Abstinence has trained you to pause in the waiver. You ask the sentinel, what is driving this urge? Often the answer is biological, imperative masquerading as personal failure. You honor the biology without obeying it. You channel the surge into creation, a painting, a business plan, a run that leaves you gasping with aliveness. The energy is not denied, it is redirected. Epictetus taught that freedom is the only worthy goal. Erotic sovereignty is freedom in its most intimate form. You are free to want without desperation. You are free to say yes without obligation. You are free to say no without explanation. This freedom terrifies the parts of you still invested in the old economy of scarcity. They whisper, if you don't lock him down now, you'll end up alone. You meet the whisper with evidence. You have been alone and discovered richness. You have been chosen and discovered emptiness. The whisper loses its authority. Dreams now carry a different charge. Where once you dreamed of pursuit, now you dream of partnership as collaboration. You stand beside a figure, sometimes male, sometimes not, and together you build something larger than either of you. There is no chase, no rescue, no hierarchy. Jung saw such dreams as the psyche's rehearsal for individuation's final stage, the sacred marriage of opposites within. Your eros is preparing you not for a savior, but for a co-creator. You wake from these dreams not with longing, but with clarity. You know the qualities you seek because you have cultivated them in yourself. Curiosity, accountability, reverence for the mystery. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, at dawn when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being. In abstinence, your work is the daily practice of erotic integrity. You refuse the situationship that offers intensity without depth. You decline the modern arrangement that asks you to compartmentalize your heart. You end the conversation that begins with objectification. Each refusal is not deprivation, it is devotion. You are devoted to the version of love that mirrors your wholeness, not your woundedness. The final threshold approaches, the moment when abstinence is no longer a practice but a state of being. You no longer count the months. You no longer brace for the next test. You move through the world with a quiet certainty that your desire is your own, your standards are your own, your future is your own. Emotional freedom is not the absence of wanting, it is the presence of choice. Self-sovereignty is not the rejection of connection, it is the foundation of connection. Inner peace is not the silencing of the heart, it is the heart's alignment with truth.